Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. For over a decade, Moments with Marianne radio show has featured dynamic conversations with both indie and New York Times bestselling authors, business leaders, celebrities, mind, body, spirit experts, visionaries, lifestyle experts, and brands you need to know about. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest Alka Joshi, who's here to share with us her new novel, 6 Days in Bombay, a journey through art and identity, unraveling secrets across Europe and in the wake of a painter's death. So what happens when a celebrated Indian artist, known at home but really kind of hidden from the world, sparks a journey that unravels secrets across continents and within ourselves? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. So if you're a book lover, there's no doubt that you've heard about Alka Joshi before. She's an international best-selling author of the Jaipur trilogy. Her first book in the trilogy, The Henna Artist, was an instant #1 New York Times bestseller and a Reese Witherspoon Book Club pick. So welcome to the show, Alka Joshi.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I'm happy to be here.
Oh my goodness, it's always such a great honor to spend time with you, and I love talking about your books. Your books, I pick them up and I never want to put them down. And then I wait for the next one. So what inspired you to write 6 Days in Bombay?
In 2019, I was visiting India, and I was in New Delhi. I went to the Modern Art Museum there, and I saw all these paintings by an artist I had never heard of before. And that's unusual because I have a bachelor's in art history. So I have done a lot of study of various painters and artists all throughout history. So I, was so intrigued by these paintings. There were many of them in one area of the museum, and I noticed that most of them had stopped right around 1939, 1937. And I thought, oh, I wonder what happened to this woman after that period. So I went down to the museum bookstore and saw that there were a couple of biographies about her, and I checked them out and brought them home and read about this fascinating woman. And it turned out that she lived in the 20s, 30s, and died in 1941 at the age of 28, which is why I think I had never heard of her, and which is why none of my coursework ever had anything to do with her. But I also do think that some of it had to do with the fact that she was a woman. So many female artists, so many women in many different industries have been ignored, dropped by the wayside of history over time, that I thought, oh no, this is just another one of those cases. I cannot let this happen, especially because she shares my heritage. So her name was Amrita Sher-Gil. She was half Indian and half European. And I think maybe that's another reason why I hadn't heard of her, even though most Indians know that name and they know that she was a famous artist at that time. Globally, she is not as well recognized. And I just thought, okay, I have to write a book about her. At some point, when I have time, I'm going to write a historical fiction book based on somebody who is just like her. Because another fascinating thing about her was that she was such an iconoclast in her time. She was doing a lot of nudes, painting nudes at a time when women were not allowed in the 1930s to paint nudes. It was considered scandalous, even though men had been doing it for centuries. And I thought, well, that's not fair. And then also she was an iconoclast in the sense that she was free spirited in her sexuality, which meant that she slept with both men and women and really wasn't coy about it. And so, she sort of stood out and eventually did marry because her mother begged her to, and to put an end to all of this scandal mongering. But then what happened is that she ended up marrying her first cousin once again, an iconoclast. So I just found her to be one of those women whom I would really like to know. So I wanted my readers to know about her as well.
Well, I am so glad that you wrote this book. And can you share with us what her art was like? I'm just so
Mhm.
curious to hear more about that and how it really touched you.
Her paintings were this combination of surrealism, postmodernism, impressionism, and avant-garde techniques. So what I found were traces of Modigliani and Cézanne and Gauguin and a little bit of Man Ray, a little bit of Picasso. And I just realized that I had not run across any artists who were combining so many different techniques. The other thing that really appealed to me was her subject matter. She was really painting a lot of women in the throes of getting ready for an arranged marriage, or women who were doing all of the hard labor, both at home and in the fields, but not being recognized for it. Women who were sort of being forced by society to accept things about their lives that they may not have wanted to accept, but felt that they had no other choice. And she was able to capture the feelings of these women in the faces that she painted. So I completely understood anytime I saw one of her paintings of women, I could really feel the lack of agency in that woman and how it saddened her and hampered her life. And that's another thing. I just, am always on the lookout for ways in which we can give women more agency. And she was definitely trying to do that through her art. And that appealed to
Oh my goodness. It just sounds so absolutely fascinating. I'm going to be doing a deep dive into her art as well now. I'm just so curious about it all. And I'm sure many people are after reading this beautiful novel. When you were pulling this subject matter together, because I know you go in and you do some research,
me.
and she's had such a just a remarkable life, but always kind of on the edge of culture. What
Yeah.
was some of the research that you found that kind of surprised you?
So one of the ways in which I do research is that I actually go to the places I write about. It's very important for me that the reader feels as if the journey they are taking throughout the book is authentic. And that means that they need to taste the um, the hot chocolate with the whipped cream in Prague at the cafe that I'm talking about. They need to be able to experience how far it takes to go from the River Arno into the studio of the artists whom we are going to be visiting. So there are uh, experts whom I look for in each of these areas. I looked for experts who were understood art history of the 1930s time period, who knew what the landscape of the politics and the economics were during that period, both in India and in Europe, because I know we're going to be going to both of those places. And then also, I'm looking for photo archivists who can actually show me people during that time period, the clothes they're wearing, what they are doing in terms of activities, how they're traveling from one place to another, and so on. So I actually had to get on a plane. And of course, I had already been to Bombay, or Mumbai as it is known today. But back in 1937, my setting for the novel, it was called Bombay. And then the first thing I found out was that there was a steamship that people used to take from Bombay. It went through the Suez Canal and landed in Istanbul. And from Istanbul, you could take one of 6 Orient Express trains to get into various parts of Europe. So I knew that our protagonist is going to be able to get into all of these points through Istanbul. So, of course, I had been to Istanbul. I went to the Grand Bazaar there so I could write about it someday. And then I went into Prague. And there I met with Martina, who teaches at the Czech Academy of Sciences. Very brilliant woman, born and bred Prague. She knows everything there is to know about the history of Prague. So the first thing I said when I met her is, where is our protagonist going to go first, second, and third? And she actually walked me through the paces. She took me to the British Embassy. She took me to the cafe where our protagonist, Sona, is going to get a little bite to eat and meet up with some of the friends and lovers of this painter whom she has come to know. And then also, Martina took me to a couple of exhibitions of the kind of dinnerware that was being used. Bakelite was really big at that time. So, of course, I find ways to work all of this into the narrative. And then, of course, she took me to an exhibition of the clothes that women were wearing at that time. And believe it or not, in Prague, the women were very fashionable. They were very conscious of French fashion. And so I got a chance to describe how the women in the street are dressed and what they are wearing. Then from there, I went to Paris and I met with a photo archivist, Claire. And she showed me a lot of photographs of the 1937 expo that took place in Paris. It was a world expo, and it was the expo for which Picasso had been asked to do a mural for the Spanish exhibition. And the painting he did for that was called Guernica, which is one of his most famous paintings. And it was to protest the bombing of Catalonia by the fascists and the Nazis. I learned also in Paris through Claire about Peggy Guggenheim and how she was buying up a lot of these avant-garde, surrealist, postmodernists, and how they all used to hang out in the same cafes that she would hang out. She ended up with a vast collection of their art. And who knows, maybe she even ended up with something from Amrita Sher-Gil, but we don't know because most of Amrita's work ended up in private collections. Peggy Guggenheim is the one to whom we owe a great deal of thanks for saving so much of this art and hiding it from the Nazis when they came through Paris. Then I went to Florence and met with Samuele. Samuele is an art historian and he teaches at the University of Milan. But he took the train down to Florence to meet with me there because that was where I was basing some part of my story. And so he walked me through the Via Tornabuoni and walked me to the Arno and walked me to all these different cafes and academias where he felt that my characters would have hung out. Then finally, I flew over to London to find where I think that our protagonist's family, who abandoned her when she was only 3 years old in India, that's where I think we're going to find her family. So that is a vast amount of research that I do, not only on the ground, but as I'm going through these places, I'm reading a lot about the time period and what is happening with the people. So a couple of really interesting things I found. One was that in 1937 in India, where we start the story, there is as much political unrest going on as there was in Europe in the same time period. It's almost as if the entire world was going through some kind of emotional upheaval and an upheaval against oppressors. So in India, it was the Indians against the British Raj. They did not want them to be in power anymore after 350 years. They were ready to get them out. And so there are a lot of these freedom fighters and operating underground and a lot of meetings that are taking place, clandestine meetings about how to get the British out. And then the same thing I found out was happening in Europe, of course. As the Nazis and fascists are gaining power, is a lot of underground rebellion going on to try to quash those two factions. So that was one really interesting thing, and I'd never thought about the symbiosis of what was happening around the world. Another thing that I found out was that um, the well, this is something I didn't know anything about, but I discovered that my protagonist was going to have to be half Indian and half European, just like the painter was half European and half Indian. And in India, those are called Anglo Indians. So I don't know Anglo Indians. I didn't know anything about that community. And I had to start researching what that community was about so I could, very authentically write about them. So in the 1600s, when the British East India Company first came on the shores of India in order to trade with the Mughals, they came primarily with men. Now, the men, some of them had left families behind in England, but many of them were not married. They were lonely. So, after a time, the British East India Company said, you know what? We need to find women for these men. How do we encourage that to happen? How about if we offer silver to every one of these alliances that results in an offspring? So, for every offspring, we will give you more silver. Consequently, these European men, whether they happen to be English or Dutch or Portuguese or French or German, there were so many colonizers at the time in India. If they found a partner who was an Indian woman and they had offspring, which were then called Anglo Indian, they received money, monetary reward for it. So we ended up with a lot of Anglo Indians. Now, over time, as we get closer and closer to India's independence in 1947, we end up with one of three results. One is that the European father decides to stay in India because his pension will go further there after his work stint is over. Secondly, he might decide to take the whole family back to his home country and raise the Anglo Indian children there, which was a good consequence for them. But thirdly, and a tragic thing that would happen is that if they had left a family behind in their home country, they would go back to that first family and abandon the Anglo Indian children in India. And that, unfortunately, is what has happened to our protagonist. When she was 3 years old, her father abandoned her and her mother. And so there's a conflict going on, I realized. As I was researching this, I thought, well, this is a very interesting conflict that this Anglo Indian woman is going to have in India. While she's working in India, because she has some white blood, she actually can take advantage of it and have a better paying job, have better opportunities, have promotions that the Indians are not getting to have in this primarily British Raj culture. But also, she has a lot of resentment about her British blood because it was her father, not her Indian mother, but her English father who abandoned her. And consequently, she has had a very hard life after he abandoned them. So that was a really interesting thing for me to find out about all the Anglo Indians and how that whole community was started in India in the first place.
That's just such remarkable research you've done to bring this book to life. And I think for our listeners that are unaware of just what it's like with the culture in India, especially during that time for women,
Mhm,
I think they don't realize how difficult it is. And
mhm.
especially if you are Anglo Indian.
Yes, exactly. And there are so many complications that come with that. At a time when Indians want the British out, they are looking at Anglo Indians suspiciously. Which side are they on? To whom are they owing their allegiance? Is it to Indians or is it to the British? Um, and the British are looking at these Anglo Indians in the same way. To whom are they owing their allegiance? And are they going to somehow betray them? Or are they going to be on the side of the British? So, yes, it is a very confusing time for a lot of people. And, the Anglo Indians who were being raised in the home countries of their fathers had a much easier time and a better time adjusting to primarily a white culture than the Anglo-Indians did in India when it's really turning more into an Indian culture.
Mm-mm-mm. That is just so remarkable. And I know we've shared so much about the story in as you're weaving this all together for us.
Mhm.
Can you just share a little bit about the story itself without giving away any spoilers?
Sure. Yes. And this was the fascinating part. It really describes a process of how we authors go about figuring out where we're going to start the story and where we're going to end the story. Um, I knew that Amrita Sher-Gil, the artist, as I said, she died tragically at the tender age of 28. Now, how did that happen? I looked into it, I did some research on it. No autopsies were performed at that time anywhere. And so we will never know unless her body is exhumed in some way and if it's in any kind of shape, to be looked at. But what happened is that she was about to put on the biggest exhibition of her life. She had been working really hard toward it. 2 days before the exhibition, she has some stomach complaint. There's some pain. And her husband takes her into a private hospital. There, she succumbs to a coma and is dead within 2 days. Now, there's no explanation of how this could have happened to such a healthy, vibrant young woman who is very much working towards this major exhibition. I mean, she has everything to live for. How did this happen? And the closest I can come were some rumors that were floating around. One of them was that maybe she had had yet another abortion. She'd had several while she was alive because she liked sex and sometimes she got pregnant and she wasn't interested in having children. Secondly, people thought that maybe she had had a miscarriage and possibly developed sepsis or something afterwards. Now this could be a possibility, except that as far as I could tell, she had never actually been pregnant, but who knows? Maybe she had. A third possibility is that perhaps she had had some undiagnosed tumor that was growing too fast for them to do anything about. In any event, I thought that if we started with her death, this very mysterious, unexplained death, maybe I could use the novel as a way of explaining how it happened. How did this woman die? So then I thought, but if I start with the death, where do I go from there? Who will carry the story forward? And I thought, well, what if it's the Anglo-Indian nurse who is taking care of her in that private hospitals? Because in private hospitals of the 1930s, it was either English women who were the nuns who came over from Scotland or various places in England who worked in the nursing staff, or it was the British doctors who had come from England to work in India who were working in these private hospitals, or it could be anybody with some British blood who could be an Anglo-Indian who might be working on the nursing staff as well. So that's where the idea of Sona, the Anglo-Indian nurse, came along. And Sona is taking care of Mira, this incredible painter, for the 6 days that she is in this hospital in Bombay. And the two women bond over the fact that they have this dual identity. They are both half Indian and half European. Although Mira, the painter, is very comfortable with all of her identities in the same way that the real painter was comfortable with her identities. But Sona, of course, has a lot of conflict about her British blood. And so she is looking at Mira almost as a model for how she could maybe someday think about herself and those various identities. So when Mira dies, now we have to carry the story forward by having her lead 4 paintings for the nurse to deliver to Mira's former friends and lovers throughout Europe. And Sona, the nurse, actually loses her job because Mira's unexplained death makes everybody suspicious about her and her role in the death. And they need a scapegoat, so she becomes a scapegoat. When she loses her job, she has no choice but to go to Europe and deliver these paintings. And so, in doing that, she is going to discover from friends and lovers of Mira more about that artist and maybe come to find out exactly what happened in death. That's how the story progresses. And now we see Sona in Istanbul, we see her in Prague, in Florence, in Paris, and London, and then back in Bombay when she actually figures out what happened to her favorite patient, Mira.
Oh my goodness. To bring all that together, especially with a Anglo-Indian nurse struggling with her identity, and then you have this artist that is so carefree. Was it difficult to approach the writing of this of Sonia in a way that she's kind of caught between these two cultures?
Yes, but in a way, yes, and in a way, no. Because I myself struggle so much with my identity and have throughout my life. I'm born and bred in India. We leave when I'm 9 years old. We come to America, where all of a sudden I realize in the Midwest in the 1960s, it is not cool to be Indian. And so I say to my mother, Mom, I don't want to be Indian. This is ridiculous. People look at me funny. They ask me why we have so many people in India. Is everybody starving? Why can't we do anything about being a third world country? I said, Mom, I just want to fit in. I'm 9 years old. I just want to be American. And so for so many decades, that's all I ever wanted to be is American. I wanted to not speak in the language I have been raised in, which is Hindi. I didn't want to eat Indian food because nobody would sit next to me in the bus or in class because they said I smelled funny. And it was the curry speaking, right? And then also was dressing in Indian clothes for a while. And I just said, Mom, everybody at school wears jeans and t-shirts. So that's all I'm going to wear. We have to get some jeans and t-shirts. So for so many years, I just wanted to be American because I didn't want to have the baggage of what India represented in this world. And for much of the 60s, 70s, and maybe early 80s, India was known as a third world country. So I think it wasn't until I started writing about India in my 50s that I realized what a beautiful heritage I come from, what a culturally rich and complicated history India has had. And I thought, I need to own this. I mean, this is my birthright. And there is a lot here about India that I don't think I ever knew or had not ever studied before. And so I want to be also Indian. And I thought, can I be both? And this is a question that Sona asks herself in the book. Can I be both? Is it possible to be both? And Mira is a shining example to her of somebody who can be both. And ultimately, I think she's going to decide that maybe that is what she needs to do is just accept both identities and be comfortable with them. And that's what I've had to do in my life. So, in the one sense, it was actually easy for me to um, have the questions that Sona has in her head as she is progressing in her journey.
Well, it's just so interesting looking at your life story and how much of this is also interwoven in 6 days
Yeah,
in Bombay. I mean, it's beautiful because it's also very reflective of what outsiders go through in either America or India or in other places in the world, and how
yeah.
we're all trying to just fit in.
Yes, exactly. Um, One thing that found out through all of this, which I thought was kind of interesting, um, is that people said to me, and this is why I love book clubs. I get so much insight from book clubs, things I had never thought about. Somebody said to me, the real life painter Amrita Sher-Gil, her story empowered you to write about her in some way in this historical fiction. In the same way, Mira in the book, the painter, empowers Sona, the nurse, to discover more about herself in the book. And it really is a journey of self discovery, just like I feel all of my books are a journey of self discovery for me. I was recently I was speaking to a group, and one of the questions at the end came from a woman, a young woman who wants to be a writer. And she said, there's so much I want to write about, but it's all very personal. And I feel that I can't reveal who I am. And I said, but every author is always revealing parts of themselves in every book they write. That is why we write. We really write to get to know who we are. And the more we write, the closer we come to the kernel of why we are who we are. And I said, if you just keep writing about yourself, don't worry about whether or not you're revealing too much, because all you're doing right now as you're practicing writing is revealing to yourself. And then you can determine how much of that is going to come through in your characters.
I know you are a fan favorite with book clubs, and we've talked about this before. I mean, people, you're always available, people love you. With this book, what are some of the questions or maybe some of the comments that you get that have really stuck with you?
One question that I do get is, um, how did I decide? And maybe this is going to be a little bit of a spoiler, so I'm not sure we're going to include this. But at the very end, we find that Sona is pregnant. And this happened because of something that a man she was involved with in Paris, very much crazy about. And when she comes back home, my readers want her to be with that particular gentleman in Paris, whom she was with. And I said, I have to think about what actually is happening in 1937 with an unwed mother. What kind of decisions she would make, what questions she would ask herself. And I have to decide that she's not going to be with that person because it doesn't make sense for that time period and for what she's allowed to do as a woman. That's how I have to make decisions for my characters. We have to look at the time period and we have to look at what else is going on around them. A young unwed mother in India in 1937 is not even going to be allowed to rent an apartment. Also, how is she going to have any money to rent an apartment when she is penniless? And so she has to make a decision to marry someone else. And she has to do that as much for her unborn child as she does for herself and the reputation that she would gain as an unwed mother. So that is something that I struggled with it. And I wrote a lot about what this young woman would think about in order to make that decision. So, that's a question I frequently get about this book. Why did she make this decision not to be with that man she was crazy about in Paris? Um, Let me think if there's another question I am frequently asked. Well, the real life painter whom I modeled this after, Amrita Sher-Gil, was half Jewish on her mother's side, and then, of course, Indian. And so the fictional character of Mira, I also made half Jewish and half Indian. And so the European side of her is Jewish. Now, as I was doing that, um, people said, well, what did you find out about the Jews? Like, were there Jews in India? And I said, oh my gosh, yes. This was fascinating to me that I called up my dad, first of all, and I said, Dad, do we have Jewish communities in India? And he said, absolutely. He said they've been coming for about 2,000 years to escape persecution because India has never persecuted anyone for their religious preference. You can believe in whatever you want to believe in. You can come to India. You can form your religious community. You can practice that religion. You can, for the Jews, they could wear kippas on their heads without fear of persecution. They could have their kosher bakeries and kosher butcheries and so on. And it was fine as long as they were also positive contributors to the economy. And the Jews definitely were a huge positive contributor to the economy of India. So yes, it was important for me to point out that there is a synagogue that is being built by Mira, the painter's father. And that is why she happens to be in India at the time.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
yeah, so that was another really great learning. I just learned so much as I do each of these books. And now I can tell the world about these kinds of things, which, our education in school only barely scratches the surface of everything we could actually learn. So for me, this is just continuing education.
Oh my goodness. What a melting pot India is in many ways.
Yes.
And just the culture is so rich, and I just love India. I probably had a past life there because I'll tell you, I love Indian food. In many ways, I think I could have lived there. So,
Wow, this is so cool. Now, in the book, also, we have when Sona is taking care of all these different patients at the private hospital. In addition to Mira, there's also Dr. Stoddard, who is an old English doctor who came to India a long time ago. And his roommate in his room at the hospital is a Muslim gentleman who is very much into reading, and he's constantly reading the books of the time period that are very popular, like Somerset Maugham, and he's reading The Grapes of Wrath, and it's just amazing all of the literature that he is reading. And then, of course, we have other people in the hospital who are Hindu or who are Jain or who are Punjabi. I like to make sure that people understand that India is a melting pot, that there are so many different kinds of people who have called India their home, and that India is a very tolerant place where anybody can find, some kind of comfort.
so you have to share with me this luxury candle collection you have
Ah,
that is a good pairing for this book.
So, one of my readers who had started a candle company, and these are soy candles, um, approached me and said, "Hey, is there a book you're coming out with where I could produce some candles that you might want to feature on your website or with your readers?" And I said, "Well, yeah, actually, I am writing this book called 6 Days in Bombay, and we're going to a lot of different countries. What if you could design a fragrant candle for Paris and one for Bombay and one for Istanbul and so on?" And she said, "Yeah, that sounds like a great idea." So that's what she ended up doing. And then, she said, "I would like to give you the majority of the proceeds from that." I said, "No, you're the one with the idea. You're the one with the bright business mind. Why don't you take the majority? Just give me a tiny portion because I want you to be successful too." And this is the kind of thing where I wish that when I had my business for 20 years, more people would have said that to me. I want you to be successful. And so let me see what I can do to help you. So that's how we ended up doing those candles, and she ended up selling all of her candles as a result. And I'm really excited about that because she's a sharp young woman and she deserves the success.
It's so nice when you get this enthusiasm from readers that want
Yeah.
to be part of the story in so many ways. Where can our readers connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
So many different places. Of course, they can go to my website, alkajoshi.com, and there they can see actually three of the visuals and mini movies that we pulled out of the book. So, okay, here is something else that I learned throughout this process. I took three scenes from 6 Days in Bombay that I wanted to turn into tiny little movies because I wanted to give readers, a flavor of what it was like to be alive in 1937. And so I found a wonderful South Asian team of a writer director and a producer. and they had a Chinese American cinematographer they work with. They had done a lot of little shorts, and I loved their work. So I said, can you take these 3 screenplays that I have pulled and make something out of them? Refine them however you need to for your purposes for filming. And so they did. We hired SAG actors. We paid, the prevailing wage to everybody. We had a crew and actors of about crew and cast of 25 people. And in one day, my director, my South Asian director, Radha Mehta, was able to film all 3 scenes. She did a beautiful job planning everything. And you can see the result of these 3 little movies on my website. So I'm really excited about that. But readers can also see, connect with me on Instagram at the Alka Joshi, or they can connect with me on my email address, alka@alkajoshi.com, because I've done now 1,200 book clubs throughout the world in the last 5-6 years. So I'm always willing to do another book club. It is such a joy to talk with people who have read the book really closely and want to discuss it and ask me all these questions about why I made this decision or that decision. To me, it's just always fun. And like I said, I always get insights into the work that I hadn't even anticipated.
Well, Olga, you're such an inspiration. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
You're so welcome, Marianne, and happy reading.
Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.